A clipboard slammed down hard on a glass counter. Three men burst out laughing. A woman in blue scrubs stood very still on the other side. Her hand stayed on the strap of her bag. She didn't move or speak. "Honey, this isn't a toy store." That was the bald one, leaning in with both elbows on the glass, grinning like he'd said something clever. The other two behind him laughed harder. One of them slapped the counter. She just blinked at him. Just once. Slowly. Behind her, two customers chuckled and looked the other way. Her badge said her name was Maren Holcomb. 12 years in trauma nursing. Her shift started in 40 minutes. She had walked in for one reason. She was not going to leave without it. What happened in the next 10 minutes changed every man behind that counter forever. Stay with me on this one. She'd been on shift since 6 in the morning. Her break was 45 minutes. She'd taken her lunch at 11:45, the way she always did, and she'd pulled her car into the small lot in front of the shop with 11 minutes to spare. She walked in still wearing her ID lanyard. Still wearing the soft-soled shoes nurses wear when they spend 12 hours on their feet. Her scrub top was the color of a faded sky. There was a faint stain along one cuff she hadn't noticed. The shop smelled like gun oil and coffee. Rifles along the back wall. Handguns in glass cases along the front. A wide center counter with three men standing behind it. Two of them were younger. Late 30s. One was bald, mid-50s, the kind of man who ran the place. He was the one who looked up first. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Help you find something, ma'am." She stepped up to the counter and set her bag down. From inside, she pulled out a yellow legal pad. The top page was full of careful handwriting in blue pen. Questions. A short list of models. A note at the bottom about state waiting periods, underlined twice. She set the pad on the glass and took a small breath. "I'd like to talk to someone about purchasing a handgun for home defense," she said. "It's my first time. I have a few questions before I commit to anything." The bald man looked at the legal pad. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at the two men beside him. He grinned. The younger one on the left snorted under his breath. "First time, huh?" the bald man said. "Yes." "You read all that off the internet?" He nodded at the pad. "Some of it. I also spoke to a friend who carries." He leaned forward on his elbows. "Sweetheart, why don't we just start simple? You know what a magazine is?" She did. She'd written it in her notes. She nodded once. "You sure?" he said. "Because some of the ladies that come in here, they think it's the thing you read at the dentist." The other two laughed. She did not. She picked up the legal pad and set it back down a little more squarely on the counter. Her hand did not shake. It just moved with the kind of slowness people use when they are deciding whether to leave. She did not leave. "I'd like to look at the Glock 19 first," she said evenly. "And the SIG P365 if you have one in stock." The bald man whistled. "Big girl guns. Sure you can rack a slide on something like that, sweetie." The younger one on the left made a small gesture with his hands, miming the action, exaggerated and weak. She didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the case in front of her. "Now here's the thing. People who work in trauma develop something that doesn't have a clean name. It's not bravery. It's not toughness. It's something like the stillness that comes from having stood next to men who arrived with their lives leaking out onto a gurney. It's what happens to you when you've held pressure on wounds that should have killed someone twice over. When you've watched what real fear looks like on a face and what it looks like when it leaves. A counter full of men in a gun shop is not a thing that frightens her. But it does something else. It makes her careful. because she knows what humans are capable of when they decide that someone in front of them deserves less than they deserve. She had decided, walking through that door, that she would stay polite. She would ask her questions. She would buy what she came to buy. She had not yet decided what she would do if the polite version of herself stopped being enough. The bald man pulled the Glock from the case and set it on a felt pad. He did it the way someone might toss keys to a teenager. Too fast. Too much amusement. Like he wanted to see if she'd flinch. She didn't flinch. She picked it up. She checked the chamber. She set it back down on the felt with the muzzle pointed at the wall. The shop went a little quieter for a moment. Then the bald man laughed again, like he was trying to fill the silence before it could mean anything. "Look at that," he said. Somebody watched a YouTube video. The younger one on the right laughed harder than he needed to. The other one snorted into his coffee. She put the Glock down and set her hand back on the legal pad. "I'd like to look at the SIG now, please." The bald man's grin twitched. He didn't reach for the case. He just looked at her, like he was waiting for her to apologize for being there. "You're not a cop, are you?" he said. "No." "You're not military?" "No." "You're a nurse?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, as if she just confirmed something he already knew. He picked up the Glock she just put down, pointed it at the wall the same way she had, and slid it back into the display. "Look," he said. "I'm going to do you a favor. Why don't you go home, watch a couple more videos, take some classes? Come back when you actually know what you want." The younger one on the left chuckled. "Or just have your boyfriend come pick something out." "Husband, probably," the other one said. "Or her dad." The bald man smiled at his own crew like a man, enjoying a private joke. She didn't respond. She reached into her bag again. She pulled out a folded white envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. She unfolded it carefully and laid it on the glass next to the legal pad. It was a course completion certificate from the state-approved firearms safety course. Dated 9 days ago. Signed by the instructor. With a passing score noted at the bottom. She tapped it once with her finger. "Just once. I'd like to see the SIG now." The bald man's smile flickered. He looked at the certificate. He didn't read it. He just looked at it. Then he leaned all the way down on his elbows so that his face was level with hers, separated by a foot of glass and air. "Sweetheart," he said, "I don't care what piece of paper you've got." His voice changed. "This is not a toy store, B*TCH. Then he laughed. It was a single short laugh. The kind of laugh that's meant as a punctuation mark. The shop went very still. The two younger men did not laugh that time. Not because they disagreed. Because they hadn't expected him to actually say it. The room paused for a second. That small kind of pause where people are checking each other to see whether something has just happened. She did not flinch. She did not step back. She did not raise her voice. She just looked at him. In the 7 seconds that followed, she did not blink. A man behind her, one of the two customers who'd chuckled earlier, quietly set down the box of ammunition he'd been holding and walked toward the door without buying it. The door chimed once as it closed behind him. Nobody behind the counter noticed. She finally spoke. "That's not a word you get to use about me," she said. Her voice was flat. Not loud. Not shaking. Flat. "You can refuse to sell to me. You can call your manager. You can ask me to leave. Those are all things you're allowed to do. That word is not." The bald man straightened up. The grin tried to come back to his face. It got about halfway there. "This is my shop, sweetheart," he said. "I'll talk however I Then I'd like the name of the corporate office that licenses your dealer agreement, she said, just as flat. Because there's a federal regulatory framework that addresses how holders of FFLs treat customers, and I don't believe you're aware of it. She had written that line in her notes. It was on the legal pad. She had hoped she would not need to use it. The bald man didn't answer. He stared at her. There was a very small smile on the corner of her mouth now. Not a real one. Just the kind of expression a person makes when they have, very quietly, taken back the room. She picked up the legal pad. She picked up the certificate. She put the certificate back inside the envelope. She placed both items into her bag. She did not take her eyes off him. "I'll let you think about whether you'd like to sell me a firearm or not," she said. "I'm going to step outside and call my husband." She turned to leave. He didn't stop her. She walked across the shop floor. The two younger men did not say a word. The bald man stood behind the counter with his hands flat on the glass. He looked for a single moment, like a man who had just realized something he could not articulate and did not want to admit he was realizing. She reached the door. She did not push it open. She paused. She turned very slowly and looked back at the counter. Not at the bald man. At the case where the cig was still sitting. She seemed to decide something. She walked back to the counter. She set her bag back down. She pulled the legal pad out again. She set it on the glass. "On second thought," she said, "I'd like to wait here while you decide." She did not raise her voice. She just stood there. The bald man stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee. He took a slow sip. He put it back down. He looked at the younger man to his left. He raised one eyebrow, like he was about to say something dismissive. Then he didn't say anything. He reached for the case. He pulled out the cig. He set it on the felt pad. "Fine," he said. He shrugged like a man pretending not to care. "Look at it. I've got things to do." He walked away from the counter into the back office. The door swung shut behind him. The two younger men exchanged a glance. One of them cleared his throat. The shop got quiet again. She picked up the cig. She checked the chamber. She set it down with the muzzle pointed at the wall. She breathed in slowly. She breathed out. She thought, for the first time in 20 minutes, that she might actually finish what she came here for. She was wrong about that, but not in the way she expected. The door chimed. A man stepped through it. Mid-60s. Gray jacket. Thin. He had a slight limp on his left side, the kind of limp that was so old it had become how he walked. He stopped 2 steps inside the door. He looked at the counter. He looked at the two younger men still standing there. His eyes moved past them and settled on the woman at the glass. For a long second, he did not say anything. Then his face softened in a way that is hard to describe. It was the softening of someone who has just found a person they had been hoping to see again. He took 2 steps forward. He stopped. He took off his cap slowly and held it in both hands in front of him. "Mrs. Holcomb," he said. She turned. She didn't recognize him at first. Her face did the thing faces do when they are searching for a name. Then she found one. "Mr. Donnelly." He nodded. His eyes were wet. He blinked once and pretended they weren't. "It's good to see you," he said. "It's good to see you," she said. The two men behind the counter went very still. They looked at each other. The younger one on the left glanced toward the back office, where the bald man had disappeared. Earl Donnelly stepped up to the glass beside her. He set his cap down on the counter. He nodded politely at the men behind it. "Wesley. Mark. Earl, the younger one on the left, said. His voice was a little tighter than it had been 3 minutes earlier. Earl looked at the felt pad. The cig was still sitting there. You looking at the P365? He said to her. I am. He nodded approvingly. Fine choice for what you'd want. Concealable. Reliable. Good for a smaller hand. That's what my friend said. He smiled. Smart friend. He turned then, very calmly, to the counter. Wesley, he said, I came in for a box of 9. But I'd like to ask first. Is everything all right here? Wesley opened his mouth. He closed it. Sure, Earl. Just checking. Because when I walked in, you boys looked like you'd been caught at something. That landed. I'll say this. There's a difference between a man who shouts and a man who simply notices things out loud. The second one is harder to dismiss. You can fight a man who's shouting. You can't fight a man who's just describing what he sees. Mark put down his coffee. It's been a normal morning, Earl, he said. Just a normal morning. Earl looked at him for a second longer than was comfortable. Him? He turned back to the nurse. Can I ask you something, Mrs. Holcomb? Of course. Is anything wrong with the way you've been treated this morning? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flickered toward the back office door. Then to Wesley. Then back to Earl. She said, Mr. Donnelly, I came in to buy a firearm. I haven't yet been able to do that. I've been asked some questions I don't think I would have been asked if I were a man. Earl nodded. He nodded slowly. He didn't speak for a beat. Then he said, Has anyone in the store called you a name? She paused. She said yes. The shop got very, very quiet. Wesley closed his eyes for a second. Mark looked at the floor. Earl looked at the closed door of the back office. He looked back at her. He took a long, slow breath. If you're still with me here, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and stick with the channel. Stories like this one don't tell themselves, and I make a lot of them. Now let's get back to the gun shop. Earl set his cap on the counter very gently and adjusted it so the brim was square. Then he said in a voice that wasn't loud and wasn't soft, Wesley, would you go get Don, please? Wesley swallowed. He stepped out for a sec, Earl. He's in the back office. I saw the door close as I came in. Wesley didn't move for a moment. Then he turned, walked the short distance to the back, knocked once and stepped inside. The shop for that moment contained 4 people. Earl, Marin, Mark, and the silence between them. Mark spoke first. He spoke quietly, like a man who'd realized something a few minutes too late. Earl, look. We were having a little fun. That's all. Earl looked at him. Mark. Yeah. I'd like to wait until Don is back out here before we have a conversation. Is that all right with you? Mark nodded. He didn't look at Marin. The back door opened. Don, the bald man, walked out. He looked annoyed. Then he saw Earl. He stopped. He stopped the way people stop when their day has just changed shape. Earl, he said. Don. That was all either of them said for a moment. Earl turned so he could see Don, but he didn't move closer to the counter. He kept his hands flat on the glass. He looked tired, but it wasn't the kind of tired that wanted to leave. Don, how long have you and I been doing business? 11, 12 years. 12. You sold me my first deer rifle. You sold me my carry piece. You sold my late wife her concealed carry pistol the year before she passed, and you wrapped it in a bag with a bow on it because she was nervous. I remember, Earl. I send people to you. I've sent at least 9 people in this town to your shop. Because I believe in supporting a local business, and because I trusted you to treat them right. I appreciate that. Don, Earl said. I'd like to introduce you to somebody. Even though she's been standing here for nearly half an hour. He turned slightly. He looked at Marin. Mrs. Holcomb, would you mind if I told these gentlemen something about you? She looked at him. She gave a small nod. That'd be all right, she said. Earl turned back to the counter. This is Marin Holcomb. She's a registered nurse. She works the trauma floor at St. Vincent's. She has worked there for 12 years. Don nodded. His mouth was a flat line. 8 years ago, Earl said, I had a heart attack in my truck on the interstate. Not a small one. I made it to St. Vincent's because somebody stopped to help. I don't remember the somebody. I don't remember the ambulance. I don't remember the first 6 days at the hospital. He paused. What I remember is waking up. I remember a nurse standing at the foot of my bed. I remember her telling me, very quietly, that my wife was outside, and that my wife was scared, and that she wanted to know if I felt strong enough to see her. He looked at Marin. You held my hand until I could nod yes. Marin did not say anything. She looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked back up. Earl turned to Don. That's the woman you've been laughing at. Don's face did not change. But something behind his eyes did. Earl, I'm not done, Don. Don shut his mouth. 3 years ago, Earl said. My nephew came home from his second deployment. He came home in a way that nobody was prepared for. He spent 11 days in the ICU at St. Vincent's before he died. There were 2 nurses who sat with him most of those nights because his mother couldn't always be there. He looked at Marin. You were one of them. She nodded once. Just once. You were the one who called my sister, Earl said, the night before he passed because you knew it was time. You drove to her house yourself when she didn't pick up. Marin said very quietly, I remember. My sister still has the card you wrote her after. Don looked down at the glass. Wesley turned away just slightly. Mark's face had gone the color of old paper. Earl looked at the 3 of them. I am going to say something to you now, he said, and I want you to understand that I am not saying it loudly because I don't need to. He took a breath. There are people in the world who keep the rest of us alive. Most of you will never meet them. Most of you will never know who pulled your father out, who sat with your sister, who stood at the foot of your wife's bed at 3 in the morning when she was scared. You will go your whole life without knowing. That is fine. That is how it should be. Those people don't do their work for credit. He paused. But every once in a while, one of them walks into your store. And you will not know. You will not know because they will not tell you. They will be tired. They will be wearing scrubs. They will have a stain on their cuff. And they will be asking you politely for help. He looked at Don. And the test of who you are, Don, is what you do in that moment. Because nobody is watching. Nobody will tell you you got it wrong. The woman will not file a complaint. She will not write a review. She will go back to her shift, and she will keep keeping people alive, and you will never know what you missed. He looked at the felt pad. The cig was still sitting there. Today, you got it wrong. The shop was silent. Marin stood at the counter with her hands quiet at her sides. Don, Earl said, I'd like you to do 3 things. Yeah, Earl. First, I'd like you to apologize to Mrs. Holcomb. Not to me. Not to the room. To her. With her name. With your eyes on her face. Don nodded slowly. He turned to Marin. He looked at her. It cost him something to do it. But he did it. Mrs. Holcomb, he said, I owe you an apology. I spoke to you in a way that no man should speak to a woman. I spoke to you in a way that no professional should speak to a customer. I called you a word that I will not repeat. I'm sorry. She looked at him. All right, she said. Second Earl said, I'd like you to sell Mrs. Holcomb the firearm she came here to buy. At a fair price. With your full attention. With every question answered. Don nodded. Yes, Earl. Third Earl said, when she leaves this store, I want you to remember her. The next time a woman walks in here in scrubs, or in a uniform, or just in regular clothes asking you a question, I want you to remember her face. And I want you to ask yourself, before you say anything else, whether the way you're about to speak to her is a way you'd want spoken to your own daughter. Don swallowed. Yes. Good. Earl picked up his cap. Now I'll get out of your way. Mrs. Holcomb has a gun to buy and a shift to get back to. Don set the cig back on the felt pad. He stepped to the side and gave Marin the full width of the counter. He folded his hands in front of him like a man taking a final exam. Mrs. Holcomb, would you like to walk me through your questions? She picked up the legal pad. She set it on the glass. She turned to the first page. I have 11 of them. All right. She read the first one. He answered it. Carefully. Without a single side comment. Wesley took notes on a pad of his own. Mark stayed at the far end of the counter and did not interrupt once. She read the second one. He answered it. She read all 11. He answered every one. When she was done, she circled 2 items on her list and put a small check mark next to the cig. She filled out the federal forms with steady handwriting. She showed her ID. She showed her certificate. She paid the listed price, and she did not haggle, and Don did not offer her a discount because she did not want to be paid for what she had received. She did not want a discount. She wanted a transaction. He put the firearm in a hard case. He put 2 magazines in the case with it. He slid the case across the counter. Thank you, Mrs. Holcomb. She looked at him. You're welcome. That was all she said. She turned. She picked up her bag. She lifted the case carefully in both hands. She walked toward the door. Earl stepped to the side and let her pass. Then he followed. The shop behind them did not say anything for a long time. Outside, the sun was bright. Her car was parked under a single thin tree. She set the case on the passenger seat. She closed the door. She looked across the roof at Earl. He was standing with his cap in both hands, the way he'd been standing inside. Mr. Donnelly, she said. Thank you. He shook his head. No, Mrs. Holcomb. Thank me when I do something that needs thanking. I just told them what I knew. That's not a favor. That's the truth. She smiled just a little. Sometimes the truth is a favor. He nodded. How is your sister? She asked. She's all right. She's good. She has a granddaughter now. That's lovely. You ever come to the cemetery up on 8th? She brings the baby sometimes. To talk to him. I've been there. I know you have. The card you wrote her, she still has it on the fridge. With his picture. Marin looked at him for a long moment. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once and looked down and looked back up. You should come to the house sometime, Earl said. My sister would like to meet you. Properly. Outside a hospital. I'd like that. All right. He put his cap on. He stepped back. You have a good rest of your shift, Mrs. Holcomb. I will. She got into the car. She started the engine. She put it in reverse. She drove the 8 blocks back to St. Vincent's. She parked in the staff lot. She locked the case in her trunk. She walked across the breezeway to the staff entrance. She badged in. She had 11 minutes left of her break. She sat in the break room. She drank half a cup of cold coffee. She did not tell anyone what had happened. She pulled out her phone and texted her husband one line. Got the cig. Tell you tonight. He sent back a thumbs up. She stood up. She put her badge on. She walked to the trauma floor. The shift ran 14 hours. 2 car accidents. 1 overdose. A stabbing that came in at 4 in the afternoon and left at midnight alive. A young man who came in at 9 that night with a gunshot wound to the leg. He survived. His mother sat in the waiting room. Maren went out at 11 o'clock and sat with her for 15 minutes. She did not say much. She just sat. That is what she does. Back at the gun shop, the 3 men spent the rest of that day not speaking very much. Don opened the back office around 3 and sat in his chair for 20 minutes without doing anything. Wesley took down the legal pad page he'd been writing notes on and tucked it into a folder. Mark didn't take a lunch. I'll say this. People like to imagine that the moment of correction is the loud part. It isn't. The loud part is what came before. The correction is mostly silence. It's what happens to the inside of a man's chest when he realizes he has just been seen. Not punished. Not shouted at. Seen. A week later, Don put a small printed card next to the register at his shop. Just a piece of cardstock in a clear plastic stand. It said every customer in this store is treated with the same respect, regardless of age, sex, profession, or experience. If that does not happen, please ask for the owner. He signed it himself. He did not tell his wife why. He didn't need to. Maren bought ammunition from his shop a month later. He sold it to her. He answered her questions. He thanked her for her business. She thanked him for his. And as she walked out, case in one hand, bag over her shoulder, her shift starting in 40 minutes, Don stood behind the counter with his hands flat on the glass, the way he had stood the first time. Except this time, when she got to the door, he said, just loud enough for her to hear. Have a good shift, Mrs. Holcomb. She turned. She smiled. Just a little. Thank you, Don. She pushed open the door. It chimed once and closed behind her.